Hi everyone, welcome to my latest video. Not a lot of people know, but aside from cats, one of my hobbies is cross stitch. Now what I want to do is take you through my personal review of using bar and side stretcher type frames. There are 3 here that I own, and I will tell you how each differs and what I think of using each one. Now at the top left here, that is an Omanik Quantum frame. At the top right, we have a Needle Needs Millennium frame. And down the bottom here with the piece of work on it, that is a Cleopatras Needle frame. When you first start cross stitching, you will probably use a scroll top frame, which you attach your fabric to it by stitching it to some webbing, which is on the top and the bottom, and then you scroll the top and bottom bars round and round and tighten them with a nut. That's fine, but the problem with those frames is that if you're doing a bigger piece of work, or it's a sort of work that you were likely to be stitching over weeks and maybe even months, it's difficult to keep the tension on that type of frame. That's where these frames are so much better. They hold the tension really, really well for a very, very long time. You won't really have to adjust these frames at all while your work's on it, other than to move the fabric up and down as you're working. I'm going to take you through each of these frames to tell you about the individual differences and my personal opinion on each one. So first of all, I'm going to talk to you about the Cleopatra's Needle. Now this is the first frame of this type that I found, and I found it in a second-hand shop, so I only paid £15 for it. I have searched and searched and I cannot find a great deal of information about this frame. It was made in the UK, and I know that its design was first registered back in April 1999. The registration of this design was kept current until quite recently, April 2014, which is when the design registration ran out. The person who registered this design moved to New South Wales in Australia. I have no idea whether they continue to make and sell these frames there, but I haven't come across anyone who's ever heard of a Cleopatra's Needle stretcher frame, let alone owned one. This is the only one I've ever seen or heard of. So if you've got one, please let me know. But basically that's all I can tell you about this one. The build quality of the Cleopatra's Needle isn't all that good, to be honest. It's quite rough, and if you look at the screw section here, you can see that it really is pretty poorly finished off. I actually had to give this to my dad, and he sanded it for hours and hours in order to get these screw stretchers to actually work reasonably easily. They are still quite stiff to use, but at least I can actually use it now. But it was pretty poorly finished off. I mean, you can see how rough it is, and even the bars themselves really quite rough. However, the one thing I would say that's in the favour of this particular frame is the type of rod they use, because it's got this finial on. Neither of the other 2 frames have this finial, but it does make it very, very easy to put the rod in and to take it back out again. Whereas the other 2 frames, they've only got a pointed end on the end of their rods, both ends, and it does make it quite tricky because it's very difficult to push, and of course it's also difficult to get back out once your frame's on it. Cleopatra's Needle frame does hold the material really, really well. The tension on it stays despite stitching on it for many hours. I don't have to keep readjusting it or anything to make sure that the material stays nice and tight on there. You can see how firm this is holding. So as a frame, actually it does work quite well, although I would say the build quality on it is a little bit rough. For the size of frame, this is a 27-inch one. I think it's actually quite light as well, so that does make it a bit easier to use. And my stand is able to hold it fairly well. The next frame I want to show you is the Needle Needs Millennium frame. The build quality of this one is very, very much better than the Cleopatra's Needle. Now the design was first registered for these back in October 1997, but they didn't keep the registration up, and it ran out in October 2007. However, as you can see, you've got a round side bar here, which is quite comfortable to hold, and you've got a wooden nut here, and the finish on them is really, really very good. It's smooth, it's nice and comfortable, the nut moves quite easily. Bit stiffer on this side. I don't think this one has perhaps been finished off quite so well. You can see it's a little bit rough there, but generally speaking, in pretty good order. The rod, again, it sits just inside here, and it has a pointed end. Both sides are pointed, which does make it tricky to get past the fabric when you're putting fabric on, and also when you're taking the fabric off. But it does hold the material really well, nicely tensioned, and you won't need to keep readjusting it. Another good thing about the Needle Needs one is when you're storing it, because they've put this little dowel in here, and there's a groove there you can see in the screw, you're not going to lose this part of your stretcher when you're storing it, so you don't need to worry too much about that. It's all wood, it's very easy to move around basically, and it's not as light as the Cleopatra's Needle, but it is still quite a light frame, and this one is a 20-inch. Now Needle Needs frames cost in 2020 prices are £53.74 for an 8 by 10-inch frame, up to £63.74 for a 27 by 14-inch frame. That price excludes postage and packing, and you don't know what that postage and packing price is going to be until you're buying them. Now on the website it says that the lead time is between 8 and 12 weeks. However, if you look online, you will discover lots and lots of people don't receive them anywhere near as quick as that, and some people don't receive them for many months, even over a year. So that's something to keep in mind when you're buying a Needle Needs frame. I actually bought this second hand. I was really lucky, so I knew it would come very quickly, which is basically why I've got one, because I probably wouldn't have one otherwise. It's made from beech, which I think all of these 3 frames are made from beech, and it is quite nicely finished. The next frame I'm going to show you is the Omanik Factory's Quantum frame. I don't know when his design of this was first started, but the factory has been in business since the 1990s. Also made from beech, but the screws on these are plastic. I think they could be printed, because you can sort of see little lines on the screw. However, because they're plastic, they are absolutely wonderful. They are so smooth to extend that screw. It's just so easy. I mean, it almost, as you can see, you can virtually flick it round. However, it does hold the tension pretty well. The only downside with these is that the plastic does slide right out. So when you're storing, I would recommend putting this in a bag or something so you don't lose this bit, because that would be a disaster. The finish on the Quantum frame is incredible. I mean, it's so smooth, it's like silk. They've finished off the wood. I think they've put some sort of polish or varnish on it, which neither of the other 2 frames seem to have. It's really nice. This is a heavy frame, mind, so maybe not for everyone. The lead time for these is 4 weeks on the website. I received mine in this one in 3 weeks. I bought it from the website. They are made in Estonia, whereas the other two were made in Great Britain. Possibly the Cleopatra's Needle moved to Australia. Now the prices for these range from £56.01 for a 12 by 6 inch frame, all the way up to £117.12 for a 44 by 16 inch frame. Now you get far more size options in the Quantum frame than you do in the Millennium frame. Rod, as you can see, it's the same really as the Needle Needs, but it's pointed at both ends. So again, it can be quite tricky to push in and out past the fabric when you're putting your fabric on and off. But if you look at the finish on this, it's absolutely really smooth. There's no splinters anywhere there, or on the side stretches at all, and you can see those are finished beautifully. So really any of these frames will do an excellent job if this is the type of frame you want. For build quality, I would say the Quantum frame is probably the best, and the Cleopatra's Needle is probably the worst. Lightness, the Cleopatra's Needle is the lightest, the Quantum is the heaviest. For holding, probably the Needle Needs is the most comfortable to hold, simply because it's got those rounded side stretches. But I wouldn't recommend holding these up as you're stitching. I would use a stand simply because they're so big and they're also very heavy, much heavier than a scroll frame. The Quantum frame is good for holding if you've got poor grip though, because of the square side stretches, and it's much longer, the bit that you could hold, than this one, the Cleopatra's Needle. The easiest rod to use is definitely the Cleopatra's Needle rod, simply because it's got these finials on, which makes it so much easier to pull in and out. But other than that, yes, any of these frames, I would suggest that if you see one, or if you want to go and buy one, like I say, I don't think you can buy these ones anymore, but certainly either of these two I would quite happily buy again. But simply from a delivery point of view at the moment, the Quantum might be quicker certainly to get hold of. If you live in the UK, beware that Brexit is coming. That might make a slight change to postal charges, and of course you may have to pay tax to bring it in as well, which at the moment you don't. But that's basically it really. So I hope you enjoyed this video and you found it informative. Certainly let me know if you use any of these and what your experiences are, particularly if you've got one of these Cleopatra needles that doesn't seem to, it's a bit of a mystery, and I'd like to know more. Okay, bye.